Okay, and we are on top of Yud Beis and Aleph at 2 dots, but 8 lines down the page. Okay, so let's review the Mishnah. We said we had a machlokes between the Rabbanon and Reb Meir. Like we started off in the Gemara earlier this last week already. We said there were 3 ways in which the emancipation document is the same as the divorce document, and according to Reb Meir, there's a fourth way in which they're equal. Just for a brief summary, what are the 3 ways they're equal? They both require b'fana nechtav. They're both invalid if they're written in our kois, except according to the opinion of Reb Shimon.
Invalid if what?
If they're written in a non-Jewish court.
Okay.
And the third one was there are eight kusi. That if an 8 kusi signed it, 1 witness is a kusi, it's okay. According to Reb Meir, there's a 4th one. The 4th one was our Mishnah. There's a debate between Reb Meir and the Rabbanon. If somebody sends a messenger to deliver a divorce and an emancipation, can he change his mind after the messenger has left? According to the Rabbanon, he can change his mind on a divorce, cannot change his mind on an emancipation. Why not? For 2 reasons. First of all, because it is it's really 2 parts to 1 reason. Number 1, the slave wants to be freed, which, as we said, is a major presumption. There would be 3 separate reasons why he might not want to be freed. We'll go to those in a moment. Number 1, the slave wants to be freed. And number 2, if you say, give it to my slave, effectively what you're saying is acquire it on his behalf. And that was sort of how we got around the question yesterday of if we had the scenario with Reuben borrowed money from Shimon and from Yehudah, and Levi borrowed Reuben's car. And Levi wants to know if he can just steal the car and hand the car keys to the creditor of Reuben. The car apparently is worth the same amount of money as the loan. That was the question. Okay, now, 1 second. Okay, and over here, this scenario is different because over here he told the guy, acquire it on my slave's behalf. The master told the messenger, acquire the slave, and the slave should be freed because the slave wants to be freed because the slave naturally would want to be a free man. That part probably doesn't need that much explanation. Why would he not want to be a free man? So it said there are 3 possible reasons.
Because it blows out there. It's a cruel world, like I said.
Number 1, because potentially he has to take personal responsibility. In other words, this is a question we'll address right now, an open question. Can a master tell his slave, you go out and support yourself, and any extra income I want to keep? You go out, get yourself a medical degree, take out all the student debt, and then when you get the medical degree, pay back your student debt, live in a hovel, and give me the rest of the money. He's a slave. Is the master entitled to do that, or is the master required to support the slave the entire time? Number 2, if the slave is the slave of a kohen, then he's able to eat truma. Once he gets freed, he can no longer eat truma. And the 3rd reason is the availability of partners. A non-slave has to have a loyal, normal relationship of marriage, whereas a slave can marry any mistress, mistress meaning indentured maid servant, can have anyone he wants, as many as he wants, etc. There's no real, he doesn't really have formal relationships. Okay, so now we're in the Gemara Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Shem Yirtzeh Shalei, and somebody doesn't want to support his slave. He's, according to the rabbi's opinion, he's allowed to do that. In other words, if he says, I don't want to support you, go make a living on your own, and all your extra income, I want to keep it. So the Gemara has the question, Shmat Mina, we see from here. Yochel harav loymar la'eved asay imi ve'eini zoncha. A master could tell his servant, work for me, but I'm not supporting you. And this is a general. The Gemara sees as an open question. So the Gemara says, okay, so in other words, the question is, can a master tell his slave, I'm not supporting you, you still need to work for me. All your money goes to me. In other words, you figure out how to live, but you still have to work for me. I'm not giving you any food. Is that permissible? So the Gemara says no. Our scenario is the same where he says you take your own income, go work as a janitor, take your income and support yourself with that income. So that he is entitled to say. In other words, there's two separate questions. One is, can he tell him support yourself with your own income? And number two, can he say, I'm not supporting you, but your income still goes to me. I'm not giving you any food. Okay. So Gemara says, okay, so by a slave, he tells him, take your income and go support yourself. The kavas like Abba Isha, presumably when divorcing a woman, it's the same scenario. To Amrla, where he says to her, take your income and go support yourself. The Gemara says, Isha Ma'alai. Why the Mishnah presumes that this is not true by a woman? Why not? Why can't you tell his wife, take your income and support yourself? So
He's committed to it.
Okay, so Gemara says B'dloi Safka, where she doesn't have enough income. So she does. In other words, if she had enough income, then technically speaking, he could. But she doesn't have enough income because, and like we said, like Steve said, because he's obligated to support her. Okay, hold on. So if the case is a scenario where her income does not match her sustenance requirement, what she needs to live on, so Evanami B'dloi Safka. The slave also, we're talking about a slave here that does not make enough money to support himself. Okay, and the Gemara presumes that you'd still have to support him if he can't earn enough to pay for himself. So the Gemara says, "Avdid in kresa lo shavia lamari lo shavia." 1 second. A slave who cannot earn basically the bread he eats. He's not worth anything. What exactly are the masters going to do with such a slave? So what do? They could tell him, go figure out how to feed yourself, and whatever you need left, go schnorr, go around to the street corners and try to get someone to support you. The master is not required to support an Evet. By the way, these are all Evet Kananis. He's not required to support an Evet Kanani whose income earning potential does not exceed his ability to does not exceed his income requirements.
Still remains slave.
Correct. We'll soon see another interesting example that will address your point much more directly. Okay. Tashma, let's try to bring another proof. Evet shegol Ori Miklat. Okay, we're familiar with the process of golos to Ori Miklat?
Sure.
Okay, so basically,
City of refuge.
Oh,
yeah.
So what happened? The slave evidently killed somebody by mistake, and needed to go to Golos. He went to one of the Aramiklat, the cities of refuge. Ein Rabbi Chayav L'Zaynai. The master is not required to support him. Basically, it's his own fault. And not only that, El Shemais Yadav L'Rabbi. Not only that, he's in the city of refuge. He's stuck there until the Kohen Gadol dies. And his income goes to his master. He's a slave, remember. Shmamina, we see from here, a master can tell his slave, Asay imi, work for me, but I'm not giving you food. How do we see this? Because the guy's in the Ori Miklat, the master is not required to support him, but he still has to give his income back to his master. So the Gemara says, we're talking about a similar situation where he tells him, I'm not supporting you, and therefore take your own income and support yourself. Okay, if that's the case, why does the income go to his master? In other words, he needs the income to support himself. So the Gemara says, if he makes extra income on top of the baseline, small amount that he needs to live in a hovel and eat tuna fish cans, so that extra money goes to the master. So the Gemara says, Hadaf Pshita. That would seem obvious. Obviously, he's a slave. He was never freed. Just because he kills by mistake doesn't mean he's freed as a slave. And therefore, why would I think that the master doesn't get his extra income? So the Gemara says, I would think, in other words, I would think that perhaps since if he doesn't have any money, in other words, because the master is not obligated to him, maybe he shouldn't be obligated to the master. The master is not obligated to him because if he doesn't earn enough money, he has to go schnorrer. He has to go collect money to figure out how to make ends meet. And therefore, when he does have money, maybe it shouldn't go to the master. So Kamash Malon that no, the master is entitled to tell him that I'm not supporting you and go make ends meet on your own. And if you have extra, it goes back to me. Okay, Kamash Malon. Okay, so if the whole idea here is that you have the right to tell your slave, I'm not supporting you, go take your income and support yourself, then why does the mission need to give a scenario of Ari Miklat, of a guy who ran to a city of refuge? It could be any slave. The guy got angry at his slave. Just go pay the bills on your own. Why does it need to be a scenario of Ari Miklat? So the Gemara says, I would think, okay, 1 second. Right? Yeah. The Ari Miklat were set up to make it easy to live there. In other words, what happens is somebody kills by accident, he is vulnerable to have vengeance taken on him by the family until he gets to the Ari Miklat. And we're commanded to make it easiest for him to end up in the Ari Miklat. So, today we have we have a signage system in the highways. The old signage system in Israel was Ari Miklat. Every major highway had the Ari Miklat direction. This way to the Ari Miklat. So the guy wouldn't get confused. He'd have to go right away. And similarly, we would try to, there was a lot of support that was given there for people that killed by mistake. So they should be able to manage living there until the Kohen Gadol dies. So maybe this obligation to make it easier to live is an obligation of the master as well. And maybe if the slave runs away, the master is obligated to make it easier for the slave to live in the Ari Miklat. So Kamash Malon that no, that obligation is an obligation for Bezdin, for the courts, to set up such a system that it should be easy for people to live there. People that need to live there should have an easy time living there. Samara says, if you look at the end of the Mishnah, the end of that price. A woman who went into she killed by mistake. She had to go to the city of refuge. The husband is obligated to support her. It must be a scenario where the husband did not tell her, take your income and support yourself. Because if the husband said, go support yourself, then why would he be obligated to support her? She can support herself. Since the end of the Mishnah is a scenario where the husband did not tell his wife, take your income and support yourself, so too the first part of the Mishnah of the slave is a scenario where he did not tell the slave, take your income and support yourself. And therefore we are back to the original proof. If the case is that the slave was not told to take his income and support himself, that means the income goes to the master and the slave has to schnorr money to be able to eat. That clearly proves the point that a master can tell a slave, I'm not feeding you, but your income still comes to me. So the Gemara says, it's certainly a scenario where he told his wife that she has to take her income and support herself, and similarly by a slave. However, why is he obligated to support his wife? The isha b'deloi salfka, where his wife's income was not enough to support herself. So the Gemara asks, if you look at the end of the Mishnah, okay. In other words, the first part of the Mishnah, the scenario is a woman who's in exile in a city of refuge. The husband needs to support her. And if he says, take your income and support yourself, he's permitted to do so. So now are we together or are we lost? We'll say we lost a little bit. We lost?
No.
No. Yeah, okay. again, okay, so now basically we have three parts in the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah is a slave who goes into exile. The master says, the master does not need to support him. His income goes to the master. Second scenario is a woman who's in exile. The husband needs to support her. And third scenario is if he tells the woman, he tells his wife, go ahead and use your income to support yourself. He's allowed to do that. Okay, so that means that evidently the first scenario with the woman in the city of refuge, what happened? He did not tell her that. He's obligated to support her, period. And presumably, if that's the case of the woman, it's also the case of the slave. That means that the slave here is working, he's in the city of refuge. He's not being supported by his master, but yet his income goes to his master. And clearly we see here that a master can't tell a slave, I'm not supporting you, and all your income comes to me. You together?
Mhm.
Okay. So the Gemara says, the Gemara falls off this option. This is what the Bryson means to say. The immaspekes, in other words, of course, we're talking about a scenario where he did tell her and him. He told the slave, go use your income to support yourself. He told the woman, go use your income to support yourself. However, there's two scenarios in the Bryson. The first one is the immaspekes, if she has enough income. If her income exceeds her expenses, so he's permitted to tell her, go use your income for your own expenses, and I'm not going to support you. So the Gemara says, "Maspekes ma'ila memra." Why would I think he can't say this? Like, what would be the potential problem? The Bryce needs to tell me that if her income exceeds her expenses, he's entitled to tell her, use your income to pay your expenses. Why would I think you can't do? Why would I think you can't do that? So Gemara says, "Mautem," I would think. I believe it's in Pasuk in Tehillim. There it is. And 1 second. The dignity of a woman is on the inside, meaning that she shouldn't go to work. So maybe he's justified in telling her, I don't want you to work. Then no, if she wants to go work, she's entitled to go work. It's not necessarily a problem, and therefore she would be able to support herself, and he would not have to give her a check. Okay, so far we brought up at least two proofs, and neither one was convincing. Whether or not the master can tell his slave, "Don't work for me." I'm sorry. Where the master can tell a slave, I'm not supporting you and your income is mine.
The surplus income or the basic?
The question is on the base income. Can the master say, work for me, I'm keeping your income, and I'll give you an hour a day to go figure out how to get food. Okay, so the Gemara says, maybe it's machlokes tanaim. What's the machlokes? So Shimon Gamliel Shimon says, "Yachol eved lomer l'rabbi b'shnei betzuris ay parnaseni ay hatzien l'cheres." So this sort of addresses your question, Jules, much more head on. We're talking here about years of hunger, famine, and the slave can tell the master, either feed me or let me become a free man. The Chachamim, I remember the rabbis say, "Harashus biad rabbi." The permission is in the hands of the master. Okay, so what's the debate here? First, the first solution is, my love, it must be. This is the debate. The Marasavar Yachol. Marasavar Ein Yachol. The opinion of the rabbis is that tough luck. I'm not supporting you. Go figure it out, even if it's a famine. And I still want your income. And according to Rabbi Gamliel, the master cannot say that, and therefore, if his income is not sufficient to pay the bills, so he tells the master, either free me, so then I'm responsible for myself, or I want the extra money to buy food. So Gemara says, is that the case? Either support me or let me become a free man. 1 second. Okay, hold on. Wife had the Gemara the other way. Hold on. Gemara the answer for a second.
Oh.
We have to have the Gemara the other way.
Those things, hot steam? Are those hot?
No, the LEDs.
Oh, they're LEDs.
I did not have the. I had the Gemara correct. Correct. Okay, that's good.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So the Gemara. Oh, in second. Yeah. Hold on. Okay. So Gemara says V'tizbra. It can't be that the debate here is with regard to whether or not the master can say to the slave, work for me and I'm not feeding you. Why not? Because then the argument of the slave makes to the master is if the theory of Rabbi Dovid is that a master cannot tell the slave, work for me and I'm not feeding you, then what the slave should be arguing for is Ayparnaseni or support me. Instead of saying either support me or free me, he should say to him, either support me, or let me take my income and support myself. In other words, because Rav Shimon Gamliel holds that the debate here is as follows. Everyone agrees that if you have a useless slave, you can tell him, support yourself, I'm not feeding you. And that was the Gemara previously. The only question is, can you tell a slave, go support yourself and still work for me? So if that's Rav Shimon Gamliel's, in other words, it's in the middle of a famine. The slave now is working for the master, and the master is not giving him food. Shimon Gamliel says that doesn't work. So the slave can tell the master, either feed me or let me keep my income, and I'll support myself. That should be how the argument should be framed. And additionally, why specifically a famine? Why is that the question? Why is a famine the question between for determining why is a famine used as the example to figure out whether or not a master could tell the slave, work for me and I'm not feeding you? This is a scenario. We are the master tells the slave, use your income and go support yourself. Okay, so in other words, it could be that everyone agrees, both Chacham and Rav Shimon Gamliel, that a master cannot tell the slave, work for me and I'm not feeding you. Okay, but everyone agrees, like we saw previously, that the master could tell the slave, go keep your income and support yourself. And what are we talking about? In years of famine, there was not enough. His income wasn't sufficient to provide food. Shimon Gamliel says because he's not earning enough money, he has a right to tell his master, either give me the extra money or free me. Why? What's the advantage of being freed? He's still not making enough money. Because people will be compassionate on me because I'm a free man and I'm responsible for myself. Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan say, "Man de'merachim abnei choria, even nami rechum merachim." Somebody who's going to give you charity will give you charity whether or not you are a free man or not, or a slave. So this third proof is resolved inconclusively, and we still haven't addressed the question sufficiently whether or not a master can tell the slave, "Work for me, and I'm not feeding you." Next Gemara, Toshma. The Amar Rav says, somebody sanctifies the work of his slave. It says it should be hektish, should be holy. All the things the slave does should be holy. Okay, what does the slave do if he wants to eat? He borrows money, he eats, and then he works and pays back the loan. Okay, the fact that the master has a right to sanctify the slave's work, and at the same time the slave is still responsible to feed himself. We see from here, the master is entitled to tell the slave, "Work for me, and I'm not supporting you." And that's why he's entitled to. The slave has to sort of figure out on his own how to be able to eat. He has to borrow money and work to pay back, etc. Okay, Samar says no. We're talking about a scenario where the master is feeding him. That's why he's able to sanctify the food. That's why he's able to sanctify his labor. But hold on a second. Why exactly is he borrowing money to eat? His master is supporting him, and therefore his master is able to sanctify his work. Then why is he borrowing to eat? Shouldn't it be necessary to borrow? The master is supporting him.
What does it mean to sanctify his work?
That means that everything he does, that value should belong to the temple. You do this so today it's not relevant, but in times of yore, the Gemara Talmud says over a story. There's a guy whose son didn't want to learn. He's very, very wealthy, extremely wealthy. So he said, "You know what?" He says, "If you don't start learning, I'm going to sanctify everything I own to the temple. You won't have anything left. You won't inherit anything." It's a story, famous story. It worked for him. What was that?
It worked.
Presumably, I think so. And the guy took it seriously, started learning it. In the end, he had to renege on his vow. He had to do Hataras and Darim and undo it retroactively. And then his whole story. Rabbi Kiva was working for him. Rabbi Kiva was supposed to be paid. He told me that he has no money to pay him. And eventually, Rabbi Kiva left him empty-handed, having worked by him for many years. He was very disappointed. And eventually, he came back to Rabbi Kiva and he paid him everything plus a lot. And he told him the story of what happened. He basically give everything to the temple. Yeah, it's certainly possible. Okay. So the question is here, if the guy is being supported by the master, so therefore it's justified. The master should say all your work, the monetary value of your labor goes to the temple. Okay, hold on. So then why is he borrowing money to eat? He's being supported by the master. So Gemara says lahadofa for the extras. Hold on a second. So let the temple fund tell the slave, hold on. Until today, sagi l'cha. You were eating without extras. Your master gave you the minimal amount of tuna fish cans, and that's it. You didn't have extras. And now that your handiwork, your income, the monetary value of your work is owned by hektish, now you want extras? Like, why?
All of a sudden you want Snickers? So
until now you managed without any fringe benefits. So to now also we're not giving you anything extra. So Gemara says no, this is an investment. Hektish Hektish wants him to have extras. Why? Because then he's incentivized to work. So that his work is more productive. Okay, and therefore, what does he do? So Hektish says, here's the extras you get. You get a car and a television and a refrigerator, or whatever it is. Okay, and how do you do it? You have to borrow the money and then pay back in small units. The Gemara says, hold on a second. He works and he pays back. Hold on a second. Kama kodishli. Every amount that he works is sanctified. It belongs to Hektish, belongs to the temple fund. So how do you pay back the loan? So Gemara says he works less than a nickel. The guy pays him 4 cents, and he immediately pays back the loan. He works again another 2 minutes, gets 4 cents, pays back the loan. Works another 2 minutes, another 4 cents. How much money do you make in an hour at that rate? Somebody will figure it out. I don't think it's that much money. Okay. Right, it's 4 cents every 2 minutes. It's not even making $2 an hour. So, you're talking about if the guy's making $10 an hour, so he's making, what is it? $10 an hour would be 60 cents. Thinking here, it'd be 1 point, what would it be, 16 cents a minute, right? It's $10 an hour, 1.6 cents a minute, 16 cents a minute. So yeah, it would have to be every 30 seconds, sort of. He'd have to be paying up his loan. Obviously, they'd have to work out some sort of arrangement, like an automatic nickel feeder or something. Anyway, so therefore, everything less than a Shabbat Pruta immediately goes to pay back the loan, and that's how this works. This makes sense as well. Rav says, somebody who sanctifies the work, the labor of his slave, that Eved has to continue to work, and he eats from the master. The Eloi Avda man polachlai. One second. Hold on. 1 second. Okay, as follows. So we're talking about a scenario here where what the guy does is he works and he eats from his income, and whatever's left over goes to hektish. Why? The Eloi Avda man polachlai. If he doesn't work for himself, doesn't feed himself, who's going to feed him? Hold on. So this Bryce, the Bryce actually says that he doesn't say love of eichel. He supports himself. If you tell me the first Bryce that we saw is talking about a scenario where the master is feeding him, and the master cannot say shopper. And this second Bryce is talking about a scenario where the master is not giving him any food, therefore he can eat. So shopper, that makes sense. If we're talking about, if the first Brysa is talking about a scenario where the master is not giving him food, and the master is v'yachol, he's entitled to say, work for me and I'm not supporting you. Then the Eloi Avda man polachlei. If he doesn't work, who's going to support him? 1 second. Okay, manda by niflchi means basically whoever wants to support him could support him. In other words, he still has to schnar money. But why? In other words, why does the second Bryce say that he could support himself without borrowing money? It should be that he should have to schnar the money, just like he would have to schnar the money if his master says, "Work for me, and I'm not feeding you." El lav shmami no, eina yachol shmami no. It must be. This is a proof that the master cannot tell the slave, "Work for me, and I'm not feeding you." And the Gemara concludes this is a final proof, but not so fast. Toshma, let's try to bring another proof. The Amar of Yechon says, someone who cuts off his friend's hand, his friend's slave, I'm sorry, yeah. Okay, let's go through this for a moment. To hopefully finish this one. So the payments for chayvel is I think called in English battery. Salt is where you physically hurt another human being. Mm-hmm. There's robbery. There's nizikin. Nizikin is damages. You kill somebody else's animal. Then there's chayvel. Chayvel is where you hurt a person. And the penalty for chayvel is 5 different types of payments. There's the long-term damage payment. There's also you have to heal him. You have to pay him the amount of suffering that he went through, etc. And you also have to pay for the fact that he can't work while he's ill. Okay, so he cuts off his friend's slave's hand. What happens? You pay the money to heal goes to the master, and also the money that he can't work. And the slave is fed from charity. Hold on. Why is the slave not getting the money? You see from here, the master can tell the slave, work for me, and I'm not supporting you. And that's why the money that the slave can't work for goes to the master. In other words, the slave is sort of injured, he's going to be in bed for a week, he can't work. So, and the value of that, the fact that he's in bed for a week and can't work, goes to the master and not to the slave. And who feeds the slave when he can't work? It's charity. Meaning the master effectively tells the slave, since you can't work, I'm not supporting you. And what about the fact that he's actually paying you for the fact that you can't work? That goes to me. That goes to the master. What does that say? It says that the master could tell the slave, work for me, and therefore I'm entitled to that work payment that you're getting from the guy who hit you. And I'm still not supporting you. And that's why you'll have to be fed now from charity for the next week. We together?
Yeah.
So this clearly proves that the master could say asay midvein zoncha. So the Gemara says no. We're talking about a scenario where he's feeding, where he's supporting his slave. Hold on, if he's supporting his slave, so why is the slave getting money from charity? So the Gemara says lahadafa, for the extras. Hold on a second. Charity is divided up into two categories, right? As we've seen before, charity includes sustenance. That would be literally food. There are many charities, and a lot of decent, even small-sized Jewish communities have charities that give food. They don't give money; they give food, ready to eat. Charity before Masechtim over here, they don't get checks. Maybe they do. I don't know. It was in the envelope, but maybe there was a check there. I don't think so. I think it's food. By and large, it's food. The food is the charity. So, and that's called tzedakah. What about the fact that people need money for other things? It's not called tzedakah. It's called parnasa. So if the money here is talking about parnasa for extras, it should be he's misparnis from tzedakah, not that he's nizan, he's sustained. Nizan means he got food. Misparnis means he got for whatever the other needs, got money for clothing, etc. Misparnis nibarli el lav shmami no yochel. Evidently, we see from here that a master could tell the slave, "Asay min ve'ein zancha." And the Gemara says, "Shmami no." Indeed, it is a valid proof. So the Gemara here is sort of conflicted. There's two proofs, right? One's a convincing proof that the master cannot say "Asay min ve'ein zancha," and one is convincing that he could say "Asay min ve'ein zancha." Okay, I'll continue tomorrow.